Hi everyone, welcome to Pinky Tech, and today I'm going to show you 3 methods that I use to apply thermal paste to a CPU. Now remember, when you're applying thermal paste to a CPU, your goal is to get just a thin, even coat of thermal paste on the CPU so that it closes any gaps between the CPU and the CPU cooler and allows the transfer of heat from the CPU to the CPU cooler. And remember, no matter what method you choose to use here, they're all going to work about the same as far as keeping your CPU cool, and also somebody's going to tell you that you've done it wrong, you're going to blow up your computer, and you shouldn't do it that way. Welcome to the internet. Now for demonstration purposes today, I've got this Ryzen 5 3600 processor with the included Wraith Self Cooler. So we're going to use that, but pretty much these methods will work on any processor in, let's say, the past 1 to 2 decades. And so they pretty much all work the same. The only exception there is probably a Threadripper system. You're going to want to do it a little bit differently just to make sure you get even coverage on it. Also, you want to make sure that any pre-applied thermal paste has been removed, and you can do that using some isopropyl alcohol in either a microfiber cloth or some cotton swabs. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. All right, the first method is what I like to call the pea method, and that's the vegetable, not the other kind of pea. But to do this, all you're going to do is put a pea-sized amount onto the center of the CPU. After that, you're going to place your CPU cooler down on top of the CPU, and the pressure from the cooler is going to give you a nice, thin, even coat of thermal paste across the entire CPU. All right, so I know you're saying, I don't know if that's enough, all that. You've got trust issues, I get it. That's fine. So take a look. We're going to actually take the CPU cooler off, and as you can see, you've got a nice, thin, even coat across the entire CPU. All right, the second method that we have today is the grain of rice method. I don't know why they're all after food. I'm a larger fellow. I like food. I don't know why. We're just using it. Also, I didn't name these. The internet did, so take that. But for the grain of rice method, all you're going to do is put what looks like a long grain of rice onto the CPU. Once again, put your CPU cooler down, go ahead and attach it, and that will also spread the thermal paste across the entire CPU. Really? Again, you don't believe me. All right. Let's take the cooler off, everybody. Take the cooler. Just kidding. It's only me that takes off the CPU cooler. But as you can see here, taking off the CPU cooler, we've got a nice thin, even coat of thermal paste across most of the CPU. All right, and the final method here is what I like to call the peanut butter method. Once again, it's food, and this one's probably on me. But anyway, so for the peanut butter method, all you're going to do is you're going to start off by putting some of the thermal paste onto the CPU. You will then take a plastic splooger, I think it's called, or a plastic spreader, and spread the thermal paste across the CPU, much like you would spread out peanut butter on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Only don't put any jelly on the processor, please. If you do, it's not my fault. I told you not to do it. But once you have a nice thin, even coat, you're all set. You go ahead and you put your CPU cooler on there, and it doesn't really do anything because you've already spread out the thermal paste. But you have a nice thin, even layer of thermal paste on your CPU. In total transparency, I don't generally use this method on CPUs. I will typically use this method on a GPU, which are typically smaller than a CPU, a desktop CPU anyway. And the reason why I do it is because then if you're turning it upside down to put it back onto the graphics card, if you're reassembling it, you don't have to worry about things moving around as much. So it is useful. Once again, I tend not to use this for CPUs. Feel free to use it though. It is perfectly valid. Will do the same job as the P method or the grain of rice method. Now these 3 are not the only 3 ways to put thermal paste onto a CPU. They are the 3 that I use most often. Like I said, typically I use the P method the most, then the grain of rice, and then like I said, mostly I use the peanut butter method for just doing GPUs, but there are other ways to do it. If you have any questions about thermal paste or anything like that, go ahead and look in the description down below. You will see a link to the Pinky Tech Discord. Join it, ask your questions, we're there to help. If you have other PC related questions or things about gaming, things of that nature, come join the Discord server, be a part of the community. Would love to have you. Now if this video helped you out, make sure that you leave a like and consider subscribing. If I did it wrong, which inevitably some trolls are going to tell me I did, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below so that the entire internet knows how stupid I am. And as always guys, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.